Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I'm Jeffrey Darty. This is New Cosmic Knowledge, and I think we're live. We're locked and loaded. I'll have Sovereign Key at 11 a.m. Pacific time, which is 2 p.m. Eastern time, so about an hour and a half from now. Hello, Manifesting Muse. Hello, Topper Harley. And I did this subject that we're going to talk about some time ago, but like so many of the things that I've done in the past, there wasn't much of an audience in the past. I mean, I've been on YouTube for about 5 or 6 years, but I only started really working it about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So there's 4 years of material out there that is powerful material, that's strong material, that's very moving material, and yet it kind of sits there in abeyance because it wasn't that well done and I wasn't that good at what I was doing. And it just, some of it needs to be brought back because it's very, very powerful. And this is one of them. The Tower of Babel, was that the instance of a rebellious mankind, or was that the instance of a wicked God? It really changes your perception about everything when you understand the truth about the Tower of Babel. And people say, Jeff, thank you, Tracy. People say, Jeff, how come you're the only one that figured this out? I can't answer those questions. I ask myself that every day. How could I possibly be the only one that's figured this stuff out? It doesn't make sense to me. But yet, I'm not the only one, but one of the very few. So we're going to talk about the Tower of Babel. And I'm reading from my book, Serpents and Doves in the Garden of the Gods. This was featured on Coast to Coast AM. It is available on my website, both in paperback and also in the ebook version. So I'm just going to, I could try to find a PDF of it and pull it up and show you, but I'm just going to go ahead and read this, read portions of it for you. And we're going to talk about the implications of what's going on. So the chapter is titled A Valiant Effort. And it starts off by quoting Genesis 11. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, come, let us bake bricks and make them thoroughly. They used brick instead of stone, and they used tar for mortar. They said, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. So we've been taught that that means that man became rebellious. We've been taught that that means that man decided that we didn't want to follow God anymore, and God was a good God, and God was a righteous God. And here these men decided to rebel against him. And if you just read the King James Version, that's sort of what it sounds like. But we've got to remember the King James Version was written by a government, a one world government, a new world order, and it was also vetted, edited, and approved by the Roman Empire as well. Well, that's not quite true, the New Testament. So this Old Testament is from where Genesis comes, obviously, was part of the King James Version, vetted, edited, and approved by a government. Vetted, edited, and approved by a government, ladies and gentlemen. And that's something that we need to know, something that we need to understand, something that is very powerful. And the King James is intentionally deceitful. And I want to show you how deceitful it is. The first line of that chapter says, now the whole world had one language and a common speech. And if you break that down in the original Hebrew, it says, the world still had and still spoke with one mouth, speech or account. All the people still had one language and spoke with one mouth of the true accounts. Do you understand what that means? It means that everybody still knew the truth about what happened. It wasn't like today. They hadn't forgotten it. Everybody knew what had happened. They knew that they had been duped into mud hut bodies. They knew they'd been cast out by the Lord. They knew they were being dominated by reptilian overlords. They knew this. Let that sink in for just 1 second. I'll be right back. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm live, and sometimes things happen, ladies and gentlemen. So what was really being said is that it wasn't that everybody was of one speech and one language. Doesn't mean they all saw French, spoke French or whatever. It meant that they all knew and understood the reality of what had happened. They still understood their history. They still understood what was going on. And it's a picture of a still unified humanity, a cohesive population. They all knew and embraced the true accounts of creation and their foolish choice to listen to the reptilians and enter the clay bodies of the Lord. In fact, it appears that a civilization-wide repentance was underway. This is the opposite of what you hear from everyone. Oh, men rebelled against God. No, men remembered what had happened to them. They remembered the poor choices they made. And then as people moved eastward, as people in the original Hebrew moved away from the prior time or language, all the people still had one language, spoke with one mouth of the true accounts, and they decided as one to pull up stakes and to set out on a journey to move away from the present situation. Do you see the difference in that? It wasn't that they were going to rebel against a righteous, nice God. They realized, hey, we got duped. We let ourselves go in these mud hut bodies. We listened to these reptilians. This is a bad situation. We're pinned in. We're hemmed in. We're doing labor for this nasty God. Let's go somewhere and let's move away from this present situation. It's like when the prodigal son found himself feeding pigs, if it was really a true story, and he said, what am I doing? Let me go back to my father's house. Even the servants eat better than I do. And then when they said, and when it says in Hebrew, come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. It's so crazy how the Hebrew says, let us choose to make ourselves pure, thoroughly pure. Nothing to do with bricks. It's a lie. You've been set up. This is straight from the Hebrew, ladies and gentlemen. Let us choose to make ourselves pure, even thoroughly pure. We know we messed up. We know we're in a bad situation. Let's get out of here and let's purify ourselves. Let's return to the original teachings. They use brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Literal Hebrew. Let purity be our pillow and let it tie us together as mortar. This is the opposite of what you've always heard. We know we screwed up. We know we messed up. This guy's an ogre. Let's get out of here. Let's rededicate ourselves to the original teachings. Let's let purity. Let's lay our head down on purity and let it bind us together. Let us build ourselves a city, says King James. And what it says in the original Hebrew is, let us build an exciting abode for us, opposed to the oppression that we have had. Wendy, I don't know how they got away with it for so long because we let them. We let them. Let us build an exciting new abode, opposed to the oppression we have had. Folks, this is the days of Babel again. It's time for us to build an exciting new abode, opposed to the oppression that we've had. It's time for us to realize we messed up, we screwed up. Yahweh, fake Yahweh, was a bad guy. We remember the truth. Now we're remembering it again. Let's move out of this place. Let's bind ourselves together in purity, and let's build a new place that is opposed to oppression. And then they said, let's build a tower that reaches to the heavens. They built a big, tall building because they thought they were going to be able to reach God, or they were going to be able to fly a rocket ship. The Hebrew says, let us build a high tower and strong fortress, the head of which is the highest of the heavens. They now understood that devotion to the ways and teachings of the exalted Elohim was the only way. Let me give you a full account of where we are now, just in the, and this is in the original Hebrew, a English translation. All the people still had one language and spoke with one mouth of the true accounts. They decided as one to pull up stakes and set out on a journey to move away from the present situation And they said among themselves, let us choose to make ourselves pure, even thoroughly pure. They said with one accord, let purity be our pillow. Let it tie us together as mortar. Let us build an exciting abode, opposed to the oppression we have had, a high tower and a strong forest or fortress, the head of which is the highest in the heavens. I'm going to remote view the Tower of Babel. That's a great idea. And this isn't the Bible. This is ancient Hebrew and Chaldean literature drawn from the Babylonian Sumerian tablets. They said, let's get ourselves together. Let's rededicate ourselves to the Elohim, to the gods of our youth, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Hebrew, let us accomplish the plans of the gods and make for us a lasting reputation of holiness. Oops. Let us accomplish the plans of our gods and make a reputation of lasting holiness for ourselves. What was the plans of the gods to make us gods? What was the reputation? Let's have a reputation of purity. Let's have a reputation of at least not lying down and died like dogs. If we're going to go out, let's go out fighting. I say it's time for that again. Otherwise, we'll be scattered across the face of the whole earth. Because if we don't, we fear that we will ultimately be broken and scattered, and there will be no hope for man to rise above this clay. That's the Hebrew, ladies and gentlemen. The reason that they went up against Yahweh at Babel and they almost beat him is because they knew that even if they didn't succeed, that they would leave a legacy for those of us that would come in the future, and we would see that they almost succeeded, and we would take heart and we would try again. You may take our lives, but you cannot take our freedom. It's time to get a little brave heart in our scared hearts. But the Lord came down to see the city. And he said, if these people speaking as one have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible. Let us confuse their language so they won't understand each other. And the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That's why it was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. And from there, the Lord scattered them all over the face of the whole earth. Let me give you, he knew he was about ready to lose control, and it's just like today. The Lord saw the people had repented. This is Hebrew, not Jeffbrew. The Lord saw that the people had repented and decided to dedicate themselves to the high and lofty ones of heaven. If by binding together and speaking with one mouth they are accomplishing this, nothing can stop them from being reconnected to and fortified by their original plan and doing anything they intend to do. So the Lord decided to water down and mix up their communication, their hearing and declaration with neighbors cannot be. Let us go down and mix up and water down their intention and their communication so they can't communicate with their neighbors. This is where we started dividing up into camps. Baptist, Methodist, Christian, Lutheran, It made it impossible to communicate with our neighbors. And so the Lord scattered them. You know what that really means? It means he broke them in pieces. The Hebrew says he broke them in pieces so they could not rise above the clay. And then the people ceased and left off. He beat us. He destroyed us. He crushed that rebellion. And I believe he crushed that rebellion because the Hebrews defected to the cause of this God Yahweh. And that's where the great Hebrew Yahweh alliance began. Babel was not wicked man rebelling against a righteous God. Babel was men that had repented and realized they had done wrong, that gathered together and said, we'd rather die like men than live like dogs. We'd rather die like women than live like dogs. And they rebelled, and they almost made it. They almost overthrew. Wrong way, no way, Yahweh, the fake God. They almost overthrew him. But the Hebrews defected, and they were defeated. Well, guess what, folks? We've got another chance. And that lesson was left to us as a legacy and an inspiration. Yahweh has been deposed. He's gone. There is a vacuum in leadership in the universe, or at least in our part of the universe, at least on this planet. It's time again for us to realize that we messed up. We went into these mud hut bodies. It's time for us to realize that we've been toiling under a wicked taskmaster for lo these many years. It's time for us to rededicate ourselves to the high and lofty ideals of the Elohim. It's time for us to bind ourselves together with peace and unity. That's what Magenta Pixie and I are trying to help accomplish with the woo-woo New Agers and the hardcore truthers. And it's time for us to bind ourselves together, say, we're out of here, and it's time to take pitchforks and sticks and torches and storm the castle again. And this time, we'll win. The Tower of Babel was not wicked men rebelling against a righteous God. It was repented men and women rebelling against a wicked God, and they almost got him. We can get him. He's gone. We can do it this time. Are you with me? Remember Babel. And let's lock and load. Let's make it happen. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty. This is New Cosmic Knowledge. We are divine. We are sovereign. We are free. It's about time we started acting like it and enforcing it. Who's with me? Who's ready to unindoctrinate themselves?